So, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers. Now, how do you do a Rescue Rangers movie? Like, Disney is obviously going to tap a lot of their properties and turn them into new live action films. Um, so how do you do that with Rescue Rangers? Well, basically within like the formula that's been happening with adapting cartoons and previous properties into kind of like live action, or at least live action merging type films. There's generally two routes that have been favored. It's either you go the fish out of water route, which they did with the Smurfs movie, which is awful, or you just basically repeat the same narrative as the original source material, but you give it all like that CGI slathering and all that, and you just kind of turn it into a commercially safe film. It feels like those are the only two options because those are like the only like commercially safe options. And thankfully, this Rescue Rangers film actually does none of that and decides like, oh, we're just gonna make a Roger Rabbit type film. We're just got. I know like there's a lot of specifics where it's not as good as a Roger Rabbit film, but in terms of narrative and structure and meta commentary and bits and pieces of satire placed throughout with like a little bit of postmodernism thrown in, yeah, it's basically the Roger Rabbit film. And I think what makes it work is that I don't. It is. I'm sure like a lot of people notice this. This is not a film that's trying too hard to match Rescue Rangers. And this is mostly due to the fact that that you have the central characters of Chip and Dale, who are posed as actors in the Rescue Rangers show from the 1990s. They're voiced by John Mulaney, and it's Andy Samberg. And it's basically just John Mulaney and Andy Samberg doing the voices that they always do. They're not trying to match the voices from the show because their voices from the show are basically just like Alvin and the Chipmunks. They were sped up voices. And I'm glad that they did this route because that they went this route because the thing is, the Alvin and the Chipmunks movies, they actually did have celebrity voice actors for those roles. But what does it matter? Because they're just gonna like speed their voices up, and it could literally be anyone doing those voices. So here they're not trying to do that. They kind of joke a little bit about like they kind of slip into those voices like here and there, but for the most part they just try to play it up cool. That they're not trying too hard to be cartoon characters, and I think that works really well for this type of film, mainly because there has to be like a good dynamic between Chip and Dale, where Chip is meant to be kind of like the straightforward, kind of like straight man of the comedy duo, and Dale is basically like the eccentric dummy of the group. So like even if it weren't like Chip and Dale, like that's a decent pairing for Mulaney and Samberg. It matches the type of characters they play. So yeah, they're playing it themselves up well here. They get involved in a mystery that involves their old co-star Monterey Jack, voiced by Eric Bana, who's gone missing. And a lot of cartoon characters have gone missing, and it's for like this big copywriting scheme. So basically by that point it becomes like Rescue Rangers. Like the actors basically become the characters that they were in the show, and they learn to work together and save the day and save a whole bunch of cartoon characters from being caught up in this dark scheme involving copyright. Here's the thing. There's a lot of like unintentional kind of darkness to this. There's a bit of like darkness, like the mystery feels like legit, like a big concern in this weird world. But like the meta commentary present here is going to bring up like some uncomfortable stuff. Of course, the big one that a lot of people will mention is that the central villain here is Peter Pan, but an over-the-hill Peter Pan who's basically bitter about being kicked out of Disney after having, not been seen as like a kid actor anymore and being tossed aside and going into puberty and basically becoming like an over-the-hill actor. And of course, as most people have already noted, the true story behind Bobby Driscoll, the guy who voiced Peter Pan in the Disney animated film, it's pretty dark, like a lot darker. Like Peter Driscoll did not go on like a rage of copyrights and all that the ridiculous stuff that happens in this film. Bobby Driscoll died of drugs that hurt his heart, and he was found dead in an abandoned building in the late 60s. And the thing is, here's the thing. I'm bringing this up not because I'm saying that that this is something that Disney should put in their film, because they're obviously not going to. It is not it's similar to like the way that like Space Jam was made. Space Jam is not going to satirize Warner Brothers and their IP grabbing. They'll focus on it, they'll poke fun at it a little bit, but they're not going to slander it and condemn it. Sure enough, I am not expecting Disney with this type of film to bring up Bobby Driscoll. And I'm sure that like the screenwriters were not trying to do this either. It's unfortunate that it brings it up, and you almost kind of wish it was done with a different character just so you wouldn't be thinking about Bobby Driscoll. but that's like a very unfortunate thing that happens here. Another thing that most people don't know is like most people don't think about with it is one of the things a lot of people are mentioning is that this film has a lot of cartoon cameos, and one of the most surprising, who has a bigger role in the film, is Ugly Sonic. Basically the rejected Sonic the Hedgehog design from 2020's Sonic the Hedgehog. And it's kind of funny, like, to see like this one actor who got tossed out of the role, who's basically clinging to fame. Like they really do focus on that, like how these other cartoon characters who just couldn't get a fair shot are just doomed to go to conventions and sign autographs this whole time. And it's kind of funny the way they use like Ugly Sonic and highlight his weird teeth and all that. But at the same time, you can't help but like think of like the fact that like an entire animation studio went under because they had to work overtime to do these fixes. And yeah, it's like I said, I'm sure that like the screenwriters were not trying to like point this stuff out, or that they wanted to like, you know, to like glaze over this type of stuff, to like kind of, because obviously a lot of people know about this stuff, a lot of people know about Bobby Driscoll, and a lot of people are going to bring it up after this. Hopefully a lot of people know about the controversies that happened with, you know, the animations teams that were working on Sonic the Hedgehog. Hopefully that comes up. And there's a big can of worms going on with the central plot involving copyright, which I could do a whole video on that. But and the thing is, I'm only bringing that up just because like those are the aspects that took me out of the film. But everything else regarding most of like the meta commentary here really works, and it's actually surprisingly funny at times with the way that it's written. And it's mainly because of the director here, of Akiva Schaffer, who I believe worked on stuff like Popstar, which I've actually kind of like come to love that film more over time. When it came out, I was not big on it as a celebrity culture satire, but over time I've actually grown to love it a lot more. And you can sense a little bit of that same knowing meta commentary style that works within this type of comedy. And it's mostly just because like the thing is, like, a lot of people are like highlighting, oh man, can you believe the cartoon characters they got for this film? But it's like, yeah, I kind of can. I mean, we live in like the post Ready Player One era, where like a lot of studios are willing to throw all their franchises at the screen at once. So it's not like a big deal. I mean, it's not like as surprising as like with like Roger Rabbit, when you have a scene where Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse are talking to each other. Like, that was a landmark moment where you're kind of like, oh my god, you have Warner Brothers and Disney, and they're having a scene where their two big stars of their cartoons are talking to each other. That was a big deal. It's not that big a deal here to see a rejected Sonic design, or He-Man and Skeletor, or a Transformer in the background. It's not that big a deal. Like, put it in perspective here. Sega's not that huge of an entity where they're not walled off enough where you couldn't convince them to sign on like Sonic to this type of film. Or He-Man. He-Man is like, it's it's not impossible. You could do this type of stuff. I'm sure there's a lot that they couldn't do for legal reasons, but it, you know, like I said, with stuff like Space Jam and Ready Player One, all these other types of films that tap all these different franchises and throws them at the screen, it's not that surprising with that stuff. That being said, unlike the last Space Jam movie, they actually use these cameos cleverly. Like, for example, like one of the cameos they have is, you can see in the background, is McGruff the crime dog. So where would you place McGruff? You'd place him in a police station, because that makes sense. Because that was like the big thing that I had major issues with Space Jam: A New Legacy, is that you have all these different IP characters, and the only way that you use them is that they're all sitting to watch a basketball game that they have no stake in. So what's the point of that? Here they actually use like a fair number of characters, interestingly. I like that you have certain characters who are down and out, like Darkwing Duck wants to hog the spotlight. Baloo has gone into a singing career, which seems accurate for that type of character. Although it would be kind of more interesting if he had a courier business. Just saying, tailspin relation. But yeah, there were. I will admit though, there were like some surprising characters tapped, but less for like the legal angle, and more for the fact that they could actually get these characters in the film. Specifically, there's a brief shot of Mr. Natural, the Robert Crumb character from Underground Comics, which, for those who don't know, Robert Crumb drew a lot of very sexually, political, and racially evocative comics in the 60s and parts of the 70s that, yeah, it's a little odd to see Mr. Natural here. But then again, there's, like I said, nothing is off limits here. There's references to to like South Park and Rick and Morty and all these different entities. But for the mystery that they're trying to weave here, which is fairly compelling, it's interesting to see where they go with it, how they use all the different characters, how they interact with this world, how they mock the uncanny valley, and basically kind of like give kind of like the same like kind of pop star level of comedy that was in like Akiva's previous film. I think it really works here. I think like this is about as close as we're ever going to get to another Roger Rabbit type film. Just because like you feel like a lot of these studios are playing it a little bit too safe here, and Disney is in like a big enough spot where it feels like they could get experimental with this and try a type of film where they kind of like mock a little bit of themselves, just enough, like about as much as you'd expect most studios to. Like they could go the extra mile here, the way that Warner Brothers was able to work something out with the Wachowskis to do Matrix Resurrections. But I don't see Disney ever getting that desperate. I feel like they would always just ship it off to another director, which is interesting because they actually did go with a different director here. And I think that's because they couldn't quite decide on what they wanted for a Rescue Rangers type film. And here it really works. Like the comedy works fairly well here. They tap into more than just like the nostalgia of it all. Like they actually find funny ways to use it. Like I did like a lot of the lines of like the Over the Hill Peter Pan, where like he encounters a Lost Boy, and the Lost Boy says like, "Man, Peter, you got old." He's like, "Yeah, death is coming for us all, kid." There's just great little witty lines in there. It also helps that you have like a fairly good voice cast here. Like J.K. Simmons really stands out here as like a crooked cop who's made out of clay. Keegan-Michael Key, I was kind of surprised to see voicing a puppet. I didn't recognize him at first. There are certain voices that you will recognize like immediately. Like if you listen to Ugly Sonic just enough, you can hear like Tim Robinson within there. But certain characters like Flula Borg, you recognize immediately. Seth Rogen, they obviously make no... They even like showcase his laugh to let you know, yes, this character is Seth Rogen, just so that you'll know that for when we show all his other characters later. And of course, like they make a big joke out of Dennis Haysbert voicing Zipper, which is great. It comes out of nowhere. Like, who would... I mentioned this, like, if I told you, like, before like the review embargo dropped, I was talking with some people and saying like, you would not believe who voiced Zipper if I told you. You have to hear it to believe it. But then I was also kind of surprised that they went with some voices that just still work for that. Like they had Tress MacNeille voicing Gadget. I was sure they were going to get someone else, but no, they made it work. They why fix what isn't broken? So I believe they actually used like a few like other familiar voices. Like I believe they used was it like Jim Cummings? I think does the voice of Darkwing Duck. I believe they use that same voice actor. It's weird. Like I haven't gone through all of it, but there's tons of like cameos in there, and I'm sure there's like some cameo voice actors in there as well. And for the most part, it works. Like here's the thing: if you're one of those types of people who you don't like seeing IPs just slathered all over the screen, just making a very commercially friendly film so that they can so basically Disney can showcase all their library and everything else that they could buy, this is not going to be the film for you. But if you're in the mood for that type of like Roger Rabbit type mystery in this kind of like meta world that's a little bit dark and a little bit absurd, with its, especially like I love the merging of different mediums here. Like it's not just like 2D and 3D. There's also like sock puppets and actual puppets and like some claymation and stop motion. And just these all, and it all blends together beautifully where it feels like it's competent enough where they can actually make fun of the uncanny valley. Like this is how far we've come. We've come from like the weird ImageWorks era where we did have the uncanny valley to animation being good enough that we can mock the uncanny valley. Although I did find it kind of a little bit amusing that Chip and Dale mentioned that it was kind of more of like an early 2000s type thing with stuff like Polar Express, but no, we were still getting a little bit of that into the late 2000s with like A Christmas Carol and oh god, what was that really horrible one? Mars Needs Moms and stuff like that. We were still getting a lot of that dead-eyed CGI thing. It wasn't as far back as you think. I'm just throwing that out there. But yeah, for a Rescue Rangers film, especially one that taps into like a lot of nostalgia, most of this works here where I generally had a fun time, even if you do kind of have to divorce a little bit of like the darker reality from it. And if you can do that, it works. So it's a pretty funny meta Disney film.